Hi everybody. Speaking into it's not a microphone, it's here. Welcome, everybody. I usually 5 minutes late. Okay, not too bad. Actually bad. It's about as late as I can be. Sorry about that. So my name is Zach Haller. Welcome to Trending Topics. As I do to get started, I'm going to share this around. I recommend that you do the same. So the show is called Trending Topics, and that means that we are going to talk about everything that is trending, that isn't trending, and that should be trending. So that's kind of the theme here. And so we've been going with it. How's that lighting? Should I dim this a little bit? Do you guys want it a little bit? Does this go off? Yeah, this is better. Oh, I'm trying to seduce you. Okay, perfect. So anyway, so Trending Topics is, my name is Zach Keller. You may know me from Twitter. I've been here on Real Progressives for about, a couple months now. And I am doing the show Trending Topics because we have a dire need in our media world for independent commentary and analysis. And I have some for you. I've been yapping on Twitter for a while. So again, it's Trending Topics. Share it with folks. We're getting there's so many amazing new media stuff coming up in alternative media, and I'm really excited. I just started finally thinking to myself, oh, I have to watch Mike Sinato tonight. Oh, I have to watch. I'm finally getting into like the mental habit of thinking about going to watch people and not going to watch like TV shows, right? Like we are so used to getting our information, the media from the TV or from newspaper, and independent media is basically going to be the future. So we are the trendsetters on that. I am here in Seattle, Washington. Everybody definitely type and tell me where you're from, because that's one of my favorite things to know is where you're from. And I'm going to put, if you want to put your Twitter handle, there's a lot of good stuff that happens on Twitter, and that's a lot of the stuff that I talk about. Obviously, we're here on Facebook, but I encourage everyone to have a Twitter handle and to Minnesota. That's where I'm from. Get a Twitter, tweet, retweet people, get used to it. I have some. Oh, so here's my thing. So I'll explain this. My kind of Twitter tangents that can be over. So, and I'm totally willing to get all this feedback, and I'm kind of changing things and evolving how I do this. But I like to be standing in general, so that's why I'm standing. I don't know if you can notice that, but I like to be standing. And then another thing is I know that most people are like exactly like straight into their live feed. I like to be able to kind of look around and research on the computer a little bit, and it helps me focus if I can kind of use my eyes to think. So if it really drives you crazy, sorry, and I'll try to look more into the camera when I can. And that is something that I'm kind of working on. So definitely let me know your feedback. I'm trying to incorporate people's feedback as much as I can. I'm kind of a stir-crazy person, so I move around a little bit, and hopefully that doesn't bother you too much. But tell me, because the more I hear, the more I can do to make my stuff better. So I've got a bit of a list for us today. So again, Zach Haller, Trending Topics, and we're going to get started. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about was Barack Obama's big Wall Street thank you. So I assume most of you saw the news. If you didn't see some of my comments on it on Twitter, Barack, so he's making his first speech to Wall Street after his presidency, and his payment for the speech is $400,000, and that's for one speech. And it's funny because obviously we just had Hillary Clinton, like, with all of these massive speeches that were basically one of the loudest and most like damaging criticisms of her candidacy, right? And granted, yeah, obviously it's a little bit different from Clinton when she was doing it versus Barack when he's doing it now, but it's kind of obviously part and parcel of the same big money system. And $400,000 obviously is I think someone said, it's like, what's the median salary in the United States? It's like 4 or 5 times the median salary of an average person, average household salary in the United States. It's a grotesquely high number. And it's funny because, okay, what angle is better? I'm trying to like find a good angle. This is standing. This is a little bit closer. I don't want this in my forehead. So Barack's $400,000 speaking fee, basically just kind of a thank you from Wall Street for all the things that he did for him through the course of the election, or through the course of his 8-year term, rather. Obviously, he didn't prosecute any bankers, so they all got off totally scot-free, not only after the crash, but for the entire 8 years. Obviously, the attorneys general that he picked were very, very kind to bankers in general, and the level of impunity is ridiculous for the amount of people that got off without any issues, without any consequences. Despite the fact that homeowners, many lost mortgages, basically all black wealth was eliminated in the United States. It's ridiculous how much wasn't done to police corruption in Barack's 8 years. But obviously Barack knew what he was doing, and now that he's done yachting with Richard Branson and doing all of his fun celebrity things, he can go to make his first speech and be paid $400,000. And I'm glad that he's got a lot of criticism for it. I hope that more people wake up to how bad of a president Barack was in many ways. It's a lot of, I'm preaching to the choir here. People who are here obviously don't take any bullshit from mainstream media, but a lot of people forgot that he, bombed 7 different, just going into the election, we were bombing 7 different countries. I think it was 100,000 bombs total that he dropped in the course of his 8-year presidency. There's a really damaging list that I tweeted out because there's a lot of folks that have been defending Obama on this, including this guy who went on this whole tirade. He says, this random Twitter dude, could be a troll. He seems like an actual person though, so my guess is he's affiliated with some Obama pay structure that he's getting this money from. But he says, Obama's administration did more than we could have ever hoped for, and all he got was constant hate, literal, real hate, 24/7. Speaking about Obama, defending him for receiving this $400,000 speaking engagement. Through it all, Twitter says, this guy on Twitter, through it all, he kept his cool, acted with dignity, grace, and even a good sense of humor despite the awful way the U.S. treated him. Yeah, Barack Obama, has a nice smile on his, he's exactly what the deep state wants. He's exactly the type of president that they can get anything through because he's so genteel and charming, and he oh, it's Obama, how could he do anything wrong? Oh, but him and Michelle, he's, we thought that he was progressive going into the election in 2008, but obviously for his first term, bad, and second term, even worse. So there's nothing progressive about Obama. Oh, well, very, very minor things, right? But again, he's the kind of teacher's pet of the deep state. It's funny because Chicago, so Barack's an Illinois politician, right? So a lot of people forget that his Senate seat was auctioned when he was elected as president. His Senate seat was auctioned by Blagojevich, who is serving prison time for selling Barack Obama's Senate seat. So basically, and obviously a lot of people know that Illinois has a really, really, really bad corrupt history. And it's funny because we all thought Bush was terrible when he was president, and there was no way that Barack could be worse than Bush. But then he just, military spending went out through the roof. Everything became unconstitutional in terms of the way we were bombing people. He, increased deportations. The drug war escalated. Prison system. The list of bad things that Barack's done is insane. And we didn't think it would be that way. But as it started to slowly unravel that Barack was so corrupt, and as all of those pay-to-play ambassadorships kind of came out, it was oh yeah, that's right. Obama's from Illinois. Actually, Obama represents corrupt Illinois better than any. Obama is the most successful corrupt Illinois politician. Of all of the corrupt Illinois politicians, and there have been many, Barack, above and beyond, made it the furthest, made it the highest, made it the biggest dollar package. So Barack did succeed in that. And it's funny because I used to live in Chicago, lived there for 8 years, and I worked with I volunteered for both the campaigns, was really involved in that kind of group of people, and worked at the Obama law firm for a few years. And, you know, it's funny because people kind of forget that Illinois and Chicago are so corrupt. It's obviously a little bit clearer now as the city is basically rotting ever since Rahm Emanuel became president, became mayor. But Illinois and Chicago are basically as corrupt as it gets, and Obama is basically like Chicago's like, yay, we got the most corrupt person ever to the highest seat in the land, and look what he did with it. He rigged the primary with Hillary Clinton to try and protect his legacy, which is that, you know, the Patriot Act continued, Guantanamo was still open, he was pushing TPP the entire time, Israel's a nightmare, like, it's bad. So, but Barack is getting $400,000 from Wall Street. So hopefully that is helping a lot of folks that don't realize that Obama's part of the problem, actually one of the biggest parts of the problem, with all the responsibility he had and how much he could have done to prevent things from being the way he was. And so hopefully these speaking fees, the bright side of the speaking fees will be that it's going to help more people wake up to how corrupt the Democratic establishment is all through and through. And it's, you know, we'll see if he spends his $400,000 speech on something in like a public manner, but, you know, it's most likely that we're going to see a very similar situation to what happened with the Clintons in terms of the foundation. There's already an Obama Foundation, right? There's already the Obama Foundation. So we're about to see that. Who knows if Michelle will run? That will be what's really interesting to see. Is there's the only real way to see, you know, to find out to what extent the corruption matters that Barack's taking big speaking fees from Wall Street is if, you know, if in any way or in what way he and his family is involved in future races. So if Michelle runs for office later, you know, it'll be a weird kind of part two, like the same thing with Bill Clinton and then Hillary Clinton. So we'll see about that. I think that Michelle, I don't feel like, I don't know about you. Type what you think. But, so Obama's obviously like the deep state's teacher's pet. I think that that's a fair phrase for him. Now, I never really like got that vibe from Michelle. I thought that Michelle, like, she did seem to me like she would be above, like, the sinister, horrible, like, world that comprises the military-industrial complex that runs the deep state in the world. I thought Michelle would know about that, but then be above it. You know, Barack supported Bernie back in the day, back before he was president, and Barack really seemed progressive, and, you know, God knows what behind-the-scenes deals took place in Chicago and Illinois when I wasn't aware while he was in office before he was president, but I didn't think that Michelle really was going to be as, like, fine with everything, and she obviously throwing her full weight behind Hillary Clinton kind of exposed that, you know, to whatever extent Michelle is commingled in Obama's political, like, energy, like his efforts as president. Obviously, you know, it would have, you know, Michelle just being a first lady wouldn't necessarily have any role in the presidential nominating process, obviously participating as the first lady, but in terms of, you know, her being part of the strategy for Hillary Clinton, it's kind of a, you know, Michelle's never run for office before, you know, she's been an attorney forever, but it's not like she really had the ambition where it seemed like she was going to be part of the organizing strategy, part of the DNC strategy. That's kind of new. So I didn't think that Michelle was going to be as, I thought that by virtue of Michelle, Barack wasn't going to be as bad as he was back when we elected him for the first time. And now I'm just really sad because I want to love Michelle Obama, but she's married to a bad man. And I had to get a twist off because I was in a rush. But I was like, what should I drink? I wanted to drink champagne again, but I didn't want to also. So I got this red wine. It's thematic. I really judge wine bottles by their covers. And I was like, oh, what should I get? What am I going to be talking about? What would make sense? And then there was this one with bombs on it, and I was like, oh, great. There are so many bombs falling everywhere that's like a good theme for me to drink to tonight. So I don't know if you guys are drinking, but if you have something, cheers. Oop. Well, so yeah, and so this is the, okay, no, actually, so I had an experiment. Okay, so my teeth look white for now, white-ish, right, whatever. I don't spend money on whitening, but I got this little measuring cup, and it has Comic Sans on it because it's vintage. But I'm curious to find out exactly how many ounces it takes for my teeth to turn purple. So it has an ounce thing on there. So I'm going to drink 3 ounces at a time, and help me find out when my teeth turn purple, and we'll know. So we can, at the end of this, because I'm all about data, good data, not Nate Silver data, Sliver, I don't even know how you fucking say his last name, 538 Nate Silver, it's Silver. So I'm going to do 3 ounces here. And hopefully you're drinking too. Hopefully you live in a state where it's legal to get high, and you did. And all of these things are affecting you, because it's Thirsty Thursday. Okay, so I've got exactly 3 ounces here. So cheers, guys. I'm going to start drinking my bomb, boom, boom wine. And we'll see how many ounces it takes for my teeth to turn purple. So we talked about Obama. So let's see here. I've got so many different topics. So let's talk a little bit about Shattered again. So Shattered. Oh, nice beer. So Shattered is this book that you may or may not have known. It's Shattered, the inside story of Hillary Clinton's doomed campaign. It's like the most fun title to say ever. And I wish that I would have been invited to the meeting where they decided the name of this book, because, so it's called Shattered, inside story of Hillary Clinton's doomed campaign. And so every time I say it to people, will be like, oh, what are you reading? I'm like, oh, Shattered, the inside story of Hillary's failed campaign that she fucked up so bad. And like, is it called that? And I'm like, no, I forget the name, but you know, you get the idea. And so I recommend that everybody, even if you're not reading it, just like start telling people that you're reading it, or like ask people, oh, hey, what are you reading? Because then you have opportunity, like, oh, then they'll ask you, what are you reading? And you're like, oh, and then you can say some like terrible, like long-winded title that you just want to say to like get some like, you know, stress out of your, get some stress off your back. Like, oh, I'm reading Shattered, Hillary Clinton's humiliating loss to Donald Trump. Just like make up whatever title you want. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to describe how bad Hillary Clinton blew it in 2016. So you can always just say, oh, hey, I'm reading Shattered, how Hillary Clinton blew it all in 2016 despite everything being on her side. You just like make up the title every time, but just always say Shattered. And it's fun. Turd. Whenever I type shat, I just feel like it's like Hillary Clinton shat the bed, or Hillary Clinton shat herself, or Hillary Clinton shat on 9/11 and collapsed. So work with the title and talk about it as much as you possibly can, because this is one of those books where and there's so many revelations coming out about it. I'm reading it, and I'm only like 10-15% through, because I read a page and then I need like an hour or 2 or more to get over it, because there are so many juicy details that are coming out. And it's weird because a lot of it, it's like you kind of can't even necessarily know for a fact that it's true. It's weird. They did all these on background interviews. I'm gonna have how many? So that first sip that I took, I don't even know how many ounces I drink in one sip. So in one sip, on average, I drank 0.5 ounces. Okay, good to know. So maybe it's because I'm thirsty. So the book was conducted, so Shattered, that was written by Hillary Clinton people, so they're very sympathetic to Hillary to begin with. So you would expect them, when you're doing your bias analyses, right, you would expect them to like be favorable to Hillary Clinton. She is. It's fine. Well, it's not fine, but it's we kind of know that based on who the people are. However, they go hard on her, and they were conducting these interviews before she blew it. So they, you know, in theory, all of these arrogant people thought that they were going to win the election. So it's really revealing how the things that they talk about and their arrogance is ridiculous. But they when these interviews were being conducted, and there's interviews with like Bernie people, there's interviews with Hillary people, there's all these interviews, Obama people, it's a real mix, and there's it's really hard to know. It's like they can't, you would imagine that everything that they're writing is true to the extent that they're putting in this narrative. This narrative obviously only shows you what they want you to see. There's nothing about rigging the primary, obviously. There's nothing about, like, obviously I haven't read the whole book, but it's basically the, like, approved version of what happened. Obviously, it's in Hillary Clinton's interest, despite the fact that this book is completely like undermining of everything. Like, she's a completely incompetent person. It's like such a relief that she didn't become president, because it's like the way that they failed on this campaign in so many ways. It's like, can you imagine those people running the White House? Like, it's like Donald Trump and his crew are all like know-nothing idiot clowns, yeah, but at least they're exposed so we can see what they're doing, and they like make these mistakes by saying on accident at a press conference, oh, the goal is to destabilize Syria. I mean, the goal is to destabilize the conflict in Syria. At least the Trump people are so, just like unpolished that we can see exactly what they're trying to get past. Whereas the Clintons, it's more like stuff behind the scenes that they would be trying to pull on us. So anyway, so you can't really necessarily know what all is true or not, but the book is extremely damning, and there's tons and tons and tons of random, crazy, big revelations that come out, besides just revelations about why they lost the election and why they were absolutely terrible as a campaign, like that they didn't even like necessarily deserve to win just from their campaigning standpoint. And it really blows your mind, because they had more time than any candidacy basically in history, right? Like, when was there more of it? I mean, Hillary's failure was of historic precedence, right? I can't think of, and other people who know American history better than I do, I don't even know what a comparable like lead-in was in terms of who the next biggest failure was in terms of blowing an election. I know Mike Tracy, of course Mike Tracy, Hillary, I'm searching, M. Tracy, Hillary failure, biggest failure. It's fun to look on Twitter and try and find people's tweets from a long time ago. Mike Tracy tweeted that who he thinks Hillary historic. Okay, here we go. Hillary is a loser of historic proportions. I knew I could count on Mike Tracy. Faithless electors. That has to do with faithless electors. So, I'm just going to retweet a bunch of Mike Tracy's tweets about Hillary's historic failure. Anyway, so she had so much lead-in. You would think that they would have had figured out a bare-bones apparatus to get her elected. Obviously, you can't polish a turd, so like you couldn't convince that many people that she's not the snake that she is, so that's a problem. But this book really shows you how just clueless the campaign was to everything that they're supposed to be theoretically good at in terms of winning elections. So read it and fuck with the title, because it's hilarious, and there's some really damning stuff about Bill Clinton and his terrible judgment. It really downplays his relationship with Trump, and they slime Bernie left and right. But I'm kind of annotating it on my Twitter, so definitely read that book. So I'm going to talk about the DNC lawsuit. I should have talked about this sooner. I have it on my list. I just have all my lists. But the DNC lawsuit, this is actually probably the most interesting thing that's going on right now. So I lament I was too busy drinking that I totally forgot to talk about it sooner. So, DNC lawsuit. And if you have anyone that you know that needs the update on what's going on with the DNC lawsuit, share them right now, or type their name in the comments or whatever. Get people to join if anyone wants an update on what's going on with the DNC lawsuit. Because on Monday, there were oral arguments, there was a hearing. So basically, to kind of give people the background, so last summer in June, at least two lawyers, Jared Beck and his wife, Elizabeth Lee Beck, are trial attorneys down in Florida. And basically, this is the first response, the only real response we had to how to kind of compensate for what happened to us during the primary when all of our votes were, sabotaged by the DNC. So there was a class action lawsuit filed, and I was trying to be a plaintiff on there. You might have seen that, but basically they rounded up as many people as they could. The lawyers rounded up as many people they could to be class action plaintiffs against the DNC, accusing the DNC of violating its charter and saying that, look, we donated money to the DNC expecting the primary to be fair. And so since the primary wasn't fair, turn my head down a bit. Okay. Since the primary wasn't fair, there's a lawsuit that's being filed to seek damages, to basically make the court respond to what the DNC did, and issue damages to the people who were harmed by that, whether they're financial damages to people who have donated to Bernie Sanders or other types of damages. I'm not sure to what extent the damages could be issued besides payouts, because it's a class action lawsuit and there's a lot of complexity to the lawsuit. So that's what happened, and that was filed last June. Now, what happened on Monday was there were oral arguments because there has been a motion that has been submitted by the DNC's lawyers. So the lawsuit is called Wilding et al. Versus DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, basically. And it's a class action lawsuit. And basically what happened was opposing counsel, so the counsel for the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz tried to submit a motion to strike down the entire lawsuit before it even began. So the lawsuit was filed basically saying, look, this massive class of people, of Americans, have been their money has been robbed of them, basically. A class action lawsuit, right? We've all gotten a little payout from class action before. So Jared Beck and Elizabeth Beck rounded up a bunch of people that were examples to the court of these are people who donated money to this organization under a pretense that it was going to be used fairly, and it wasn't. So that's kind of the most simplistic way of thinking about the lawsuit in terms of what it was, is basically saying we need our money back. That's kind of the simplistic term of it. Then obviously, the reason we need the money back is because we have to prove, effectively, that the DNC's primary wasn't fair. So it's basically the most kind of straightforward approach to rectifying what happened, based on basically seeking the first step of damages. Obviously, we need reform in the DNC. We need the super delegate system abolished if we're even trying to stay with the Democratic Party, right? Then we're going to get to a breaking point where people just give up on the DNC maybe before the DNC actually reforms and starts banning lobbyists, banning superdelegates, banning all of the things that take the power away from the people. Yeah, exactly. It can happen again if we don't do something to prevent it from happening again. And it can probably happen. It's probably happening now in whatever races are happening to some extent. Whether or not the DNC itself is involved, this is kind of an approach to be tackling the whole establishment and the way the establishment favored a candidate that was going to be pro-establishment. That's kind of a way to kind of think about it. And basically, obviously, the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz don't want this to come to pass, for a million reasons. So their first retaliation to get this to try and stop was, let's file a motion to dismiss, and it may not be a motion. Yeah, it was a motion to dismiss. Okay. I am in the legal industry, so you got to be really persnickety with the words when you're using court words, and you're not just talking to layperson. So they filed a motion to dismiss to try and write off the case in general, so it wouldn't even ever have to be tried. And those oral arguments were held on Monday. So basically what happened was the judge, whose name is William Zlock, in Florida, he's a federal judge. This is federal court. This isn't a local court. This is federal court, which is a big deal. And the judge heard oral arguments about this motion to dismiss the lawsuit. And Jared Beck, who is one of the lawyers who's leading this lawsuit, and great guy. I've been chatting with him on Twitter for the last year. Obviously, a total hero for doing this. That's understatement of the year. Mario, what's up, man? Understatement of the year that Jared Beck is a hero, and Elizabeth Beck for pursuing this lawsuit on behalf of everyone that was disenfranchised by the DNC, and on behalf of everyone in the future who will benefit from the outcome of this lawsuit, whatever it may be, should it be successful to some extent. So basically, this lawsuit's the first and only kind of attempt to rectify the problem. And the oral arguments that happened were basically the DNC's lawyers saying, you shouldn't even hear this, judge, because it doesn't deserve even standing. So standing is when the court basically acknowledges that something happened to the point that they can litigate it, versus if they were to honor the motion to dismiss, they could say, oh, yes, case dismissed, this case doesn't have standing, this is a frivolous lawsuit. So that's basically the lay person's understanding of what they're trying to do now, is the DNC is trying to strike down the lawsuit before it even goes to discovery, before it even goes to trial. And so the hearing about what happened was enthralling. So last night, on Real Progressives here, and I'm seriously so proud of Real Progressives for this, and it's, you know, cropping up in other places now, but this is really why independent media is the future. Mike Sionato, who is one of just like the, you know, heroes of journalism in general, like I think we're friends now, so I like feel so honored to even know him because of how much he's done to inform and stay informed in the complex situation that's going on in all forms. Mike Sionato has been a completely like just clear vision on everything and reporting it like just lightning fast. Mike Sionato does Wednesday nights here on Real Progressives and interviewed Jared, and so basically you have to watch this. I was just like, it was, you know, I don't really watch much TV, movies, whatever. Russell Wilson is about the only thing I watch that's not politics, but this was just, he was gripping. And Jared explains everything in detail. He was there. Obviously, he was the lawyer, so he was defending the class. And the oral arguments took place, and he was saying, and this is what is reassuring to us, the judge had very specific questions. So basically, these oral arguments happened. Where the judge heard from both sides. Okay, why do you think that this case should be dismissed, and why is this lawsuit being brought to begin with? And obviously, you're trying to understand like the sense of the judge in terms of like, oh, what is the judge thinking? What are the questions the judge is going to ask? If they asked very superficial or casual questions, that would kind of be a bad sign that this judge might not be kind of, you know, as someone who's worked in the legal industry for a long time, judges, from my experience, aren't very compromised in terms of they are being influenced by the financial involvement of, you know, the way that finance has kind of corrupted our establishment. Obviously, it's easier for politicians to be bought than it is for judges to be bought because of the way judges are seated. It's very different in the judicial branch. Obviously, separation of powers for a reason. And so, in general, judges are, you know, if this judge were to appear compromised, it would be a very, very, very political thing. Obviously, Supreme Court justices, there's a lot of focus on what those judges rule. They're on the Supreme Court, obviously. But in terms of a judge that's like bought and paid for kind of thing, it's not so likely to see that. It's more the environment that a judge came up in that is kind of how you kind of understand bias, or looking at the judge's past to try and understand how the judge is going to rule, or just to get any idea, right? You really don't know what all legal research is going behind this, behind the scenes of the case with the judge. So the judge is a Ronald Reagan appointee, so he's Republican appointee and is senior as of this year. So long-standing judge, and has been a strict judge, had a really strict ruling on a whistleblower, which is not good, but in general, is a strict and typically conservative judge. He doesn't speak about his politics, but it does seem, the sense that I got from hearing Jared speak about it was that the judge seemed like he's going to be impartial and even-handed about this. And I use those words because specifically, basically, and so you have to watch this. And Jordan at Truth Against Machine and for the Young Turks, Jordan interviewed, okay, so I have to finish this. I'm doing another 3 ounces and still no purple teeth. Okay, so Jordan interviewed Jared Beck also, and his interview was a little shorter. Mike Sionato had more time. So let's see here. Train of thought. I'm talking about so many different things on this lawsuit. The oral arguments, the judge, figuring out the judge. So the judge asked really pointed questions to is it alcohol? Is it? I don't know. It says bomb, boom, boom. It's like Barack's the shit that he drops, or Trump the shit that he drops now. So I'm doing another 3 ounces, and we'll see if my teeth are purple after that. Where's the 3? There it is. Okay. So this lawsuit. So the judge asked really pointed questions to the DNC's counsel, which is a really good sign that there was a lot of meticulous research that was done before this motion to dismiss was entered, right? So ideally, the case will go to trial later on, and the judge will set a trial. But before any of that can even happen, I know, right? Cheers, Grayson. Before the lawsuit can even get to trial, it has to go through a series of steps. And the DNC wanted to strike down the motion. And Jared explained that basically the DNC's arguments, and this is not surprising because the DNC's full of idiots. Hillary Clinton's, it's weird because she's smart, but at the same time she's a complete idiot. Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I've never seen her say a smart thing in my entire life. I have no reason to believe Debbie Wasserman Schultz ever was even smart to begin with. She's a complete... you could tell that she's just a mouthpiece. That's all that I ever see from her. So I don't expect these people to be smart people. They're going to have good arguments, even in court. And this is a federal court. And Jared emphasized this, and I won't be able to do it better, so watch him. But basically, the DNC's argument was their suggestion to strike down the motion for this lawsuit was because the DNC is basically like an old boys club. Let's see here. So the DNC said that they have the ability to choose the nominee any way they see fit. And so this is literally an argument that was given to a federal judge. It really is mind-blowing to think that attorneys went before a federal judge and said this type of absolute nonsense. It'd be one thing if it were on CNN and were some pundit, they say stupid shit, lie all the time. These are lawyers going in front of a federal judge and saying that they should have no legal accountability to whom they decide is the Democratic presidential nominee. No legal accountability whatsoever. They say that they are protected by their First Amendment rights as a political party to choose the political process, to set the political process, to set the nominee however they want. And they gave this whole story they could pick the nominee in a closed-door, old-timey room with cigars, and it would be the same thing, and that they wouldn't have any accountability for that. It's crazy to think that, and it's hard to even explain it. I'm hearing myself and I'm they said that to a federal judge. They're okay, hey judge, we should have absolutely no accountability for making sure that the Democratic Party's nominating process is fair. It's that's really, really shocking. But that's what they said. That's literally what they presented to the judge. And it's crazy for a million reasons, but if you picture a judge, they look, the court system, and this is federal court, these aren't idiots. You can't get a job as a federal court. You can't get a job as a federal judge's clerk being an idiot. You can't get a job as a senior federal court judge as an idiot. Yes, obviously there are some instances where people are compromised, but for the most part, these are very, very, very scholarly folks who have at least been exposed to a lot of constitutional and proper and well-reasoned arguments, in addition to the craziness. But it should have been really freaking clear to the judge that, if their best argument was First Amendment, the DNC has freedom of speech. So I'm going to read from the charter from the DNC because it says very clearly exactly what Debbie Wasserman Schultz and the DNC was not supposed to do. So charter says the national chairperson shall... In the conduct and management of the affairs and procedures of the Democratic National Committee, particularly as they apply to the preparation and conduct of the presidential nomination process, the chairperson, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, shall exercise impartiality and even-handedness as between the presidential candidates and campaigns. The chairperson shall be responsible for ensuring that the national officers and staff of the Democratic National Committee maintain impartiality impartiality and even-handedness during the Democratic Party presidential nominating process. So the charter of the DNC hammers over and over, and they specifically lay this out to highlight its importance in the federal election, right? In the presidential election, they say the chairperson of the DNC is required by the charter to be impartial and even-handed, and not only are they responsible for that, they're responsible for making sure national officers and staff are also impartial. So there's a million, between Guccifer and the WikiLeaks, there's a million examples of different people in the DNC, between W. Wasserman Schultz and other people. You can see them from here. There's a million examples of them not being impartial and not being even-handed. Yeah, no, I know the world isn't fair. Oh, we've got a Russian in the house. No, maybe, I don't know. I've seen a few things, but yeah, the world isn't fair, and neither is the DNC. But the DNC's charter says that they're supposed to be fair, so that people who paid money to the DNC or not donated money to someone expecting it to be fair, actually in the United States might have a right to damages because they were conned, basically. So the charter is very clear in saying that the DNC needs to be impartial and even-handed, and the lawyers for the DNC had the audacity and are so dumb that they couldn't come up with anything better than saying, and they suggested that it was just a political promise before, so we knew that they were going to try and set themselves up like they weren't actually bound by the Constitution, which says that we have to have a representative democracy. Like, if you trace it back to the Constitution, the two-party system, it does get bound to that. At least it should. I know that people like Democrats don't really care to follow the Constitution, despite the fact we like to talk about it, but we do have constitutional rights to fair elections, believe it or not, and this is a lawsuit is an example of how we can extract, how we can fight back for the rights that we're being denied when things like this happen. So the oral arguments were heard. The DNC lawyers were complete clowns. They basically told the judge that they should have no accountability for the nominating process in any way, and that the lawsuit should be thrown out because of that. And Jared said that there were a lot of uncomfortable questions. It was kind of an awkward situation. Of course it would be. Yeah, Mario, exactly. Not only did people pay money to the campaign, to DNC or to Bernie Sanders, but I mean, the damages that could be sought from this are very far-reaching. There's lots of different classes of people. This would be, if the judge came down as hard as they could, this could literally be like the end of the Democratic Party as we know it, which kind of would be amazing if something forced it, because certainly our chants and hollers and tweets aren't doing enough. But the DNC's lawyers were basically just shooting blanks, saying the most ridiculous things, that there's no way. They said something like, there's no way, and we'll see the transcripts. So the transcripts are coming out tomorrow, well, probably tomorrow. I'm writing an article about this now, so I'll have more details for you. I think this article that I'm writing right now will be published tomorrow, and the transcripts will come out so we can read it, and I can't, it's my weekend reading. But the DNC lawyers were clowns. The judge had good questions. Those are good omens. And it sounded like he was well-researched for the questions on behalf of the plaintiffs also. And these guys know their stuff and have just been all-stars about this lawsuit. So I hope and expect a fair hearing, and I think that the judge will proceed. So basically where we go from here, oh my god, if the judge issues his order in Comic Sans, that's actually my new goal in life, is to get as high ranking as possible and issue all of my decrees and orders and comments in Comic Sans, because that's the font of the future and the past and forever. So what's coming up? So basically the oral arguments were heard. The judge could have ruled from the bench on the motion. So these oral arguments were being heard from the oral arguments were being heard because the judge was being asked to decide if he should grant the motion to dismiss the case or not. So he heard oral arguments. They lasted several hours, humiliated the DNC lawyers. So they deserve to be humiliated by facts, because facts are troublesome for Democrats. and the judge did not rule from the bench, which he could have ruled from the bench and said this is the decision, but he is issuing a written order. So a written order will be coming for what the next step is, and there's no time frame for that. There will be transcripts from the hearing, I believe, accessible tomorrow, so look for those, read those. There will also be sketches that are coming out, which I'm looking forward to. But also the other thing to know that's coming from this is that basically the next step would be a phase that's called discovery. So in the litigation process, so for when lawsuits are filed, if in many situations, so courtroom sketches, because no cameras are allowed in the courtroom, so that's why people go in and do sketches to try and capture like the emotions of the people who are giving the testimony and the lawyers as they're giving their speaking their oral arguments. That's why sketches kind of came to be in courtrooms. The discovery process, basically, if the judge strikes down the motion to dismiss and proceeds with the case, which we hope happens, and I would expect to happen based on just the facts of the world, and their presentation, from what I'm understanding, was very, very good from Jared and his wife Elizabeth. So if they go into the phase of discovery, the discovery process is when basically there's a coordinated effort by lawyers on both sides to collect evidence to be used in trial. And so obviously evidence exists out there in terms of leaked emails, evidence that exists already. But if we get to discovery, basically what happens in discovery is Jared and Elizabeth and anyone else on the legal team that's involved with filing the lawsuit against the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz would be able to call for depositions, which are basically interviews for the court, call for depositions to ask people specifically like pointed questions about the primary being rigged. And these people have to reply under oath, under penalty of perjury. So just that process in general would expose so much. I can't even think about it because I get too excited. But if we get to discovery on this case, Jared and Elizabeth will be able to bring in Donna Brazil, bring in Debbie Wasserman Schultz, maybe bring in Hillary herself. They should be able to call for depositions, people that they will need to get testimony from under oath, and all of these individuals will have all the more pressure on them to tell the truth. And whatever the truth may be, right, they, obviously they're all lawyered up. They're probably all, it's because you don't live in Seattle. That's why we're not dating. It's sad. I worry about it and cry every day. But the discovery process will open up so many cans of worms, and they will be able to seek testimony from so many people that regardless of the outcome, we'll be able to dig up a lot of really, really, really crazy dirt from the discovery process. So the next things to watch for the DNC fraud lawsuit are transcripts are coming out so we can hear the oral arguments for the motion to dismiss. Obviously, everything that the DNC lawyers said to the federal court judge in attempting to try and get the motion dismissed. I mean, that speaks in itself to the judge as like, okay, this is clearly, it's common for obviously motions to dismiss. People don't want the lawsuit to happen if it's going to incriminate them, right? So it's not uncommon legal process by any means. Now, it does obviously show the judge that the people who are defending the lawsuit, the defendants, are trying to say, scratch this, no, there's no standing. And so basically they're trying to say that they're not guilty. And, in some cases maybe it would be easier to do that. But I don't think that, especially with how much information is already out there, I really don't think that that's going to get very far. And so we'll look forward to the transcripts tomorrow. We'll see some court sketches. And then there's no timeline in terms of when the judge will issue the ruling. So, we can look to see when likely times will be for that, but we don't know. But basically the judge will issue a written order in response to the motion to dismiss, and either I would be surprised based on what I know if the lawsuit is just all of a sudden struck down based on the pointed questions that he sounds like he had for the defendants. It sounds like he understands that there is not only standing, but there is a lot of complexity to this case, And it would be very shocking if the judge were able to find a way to release a written order that strikes down everything that has been presented. We will know more now that once the transcripts are accessible and we can read them. I will be reporting on those heavily, probably drinking while I'm tweeting. But look for those, and then we don't know when the next step is in terms of when the judge will issue the order. So there's a lot of kind of ambiguity in terms of the timeline. But in my opinion, this is basically one of the most important things that's going on in the country right now. Obviously, there's a lot of noise, but the DNC needs to be held accountable for what they did, period. And this is really our only recourse, since no one in the party has had the opportunity, or no one in the part. Obviously, the corporate influence is so big that the party hasn't reformed. So this is our only opportunity, really, at this point, to seek any justice for what happened. And the judges aren't obligated to any time frame, so they will take the time that they need. He will take the time that he needs to respond to the motion, and that it can be very detailed. So we'll learn a lot about the next, the future of the case based on what the judge's response to the motion to dismiss is. But there's a few articles. There's not much mainstream media coverage of this. I wonder why. Weird. I'm so surprised. Why would they not be covering this? So independent media is all over it, and I do have to applaud Mike Sinato for hosting that amazing interview last night with Jared Beck, and for Real Progressives. I mean, I honestly I'm not sitting here about to be a straight-on media critic, but the Pulitzer Prizes were just awarded, and Peggy Noonan, it's Mouthpiece Awards. All these awards are just who gets the blessing from the deep state in terms of who we want to bless as the right ones. If people who are doing the realist journalism right now are lay people, basically. They're citizen journalists or independent journalists. I mean, obviously a lot of established journalists are able to, but what Mike's interview last night was on his long list of outstanding work. Are they purple? Almost. I'm just hats off to Mike for the interview last night, and I'm so proud of Real Progressives. I'm like, oh my God, this is the most important thing that anyone could be understanding in terms of the United States and the future of democracy right now, because this applies to every party. This doesn't just apply to the Democratic Party on a federal level. This applies to the Republican Party. This applies to state parties. This is the lawsuit that is going to institutionalize fairness in the nominating process or not. And I'm not trying to be dramatic, but literally democracy hangs in the balance in the outcome of this case. And the outcome can be many things. It could be a lot or a little. And for people like me, for the millions of people who voted for Bernie Sanders and knew what happened to us, we know the severity of what we were robbed, and punitive damages and the damages that are issued, who knows to what extent, to how far-reaching those would be. But everyone who followed Bernie Sanders and supported him and campaigned for him and donated money to him, we all know the cost that we put in to try and get that person elected. And in the court system, there should be some recourse to us getting compensated for that time, because the promise that was made to us by us participating in the DNC's politics, the promise was through the charter to us that represents the Constitution of the United States, that this would be an impartial and even-handed primary. And not only was it not, it was not in a malicious way. And that's kind of an interesting thing that I'm going to be looking for in the transcripts, is to see how much they think that the Democratic Party did this with kind of malicious intent to try and focus it on Hillary, versus what I think was the argument that they would have made before, is that they just wanted a Democrat to win. I think that, so if God knows if I would have ever said yes to this back in the day. I hope to God I would not have. But I really wish they would have include me in as they were trying to figure out how to rig the primary, because if they would have set up the whole primary thing, they could have covered for rigging it for Hillary way more if they just said we're trying to rig it for a Democrat. Not that they would ever want to use the word rig, but they need to be saying we need to give the Democratic Party as much support as we possibly can. Obviously, with a lot of candidates, that would siphon resources from the candidate that is the greediest and wants the most money, Hillary. But it does kind of make sense that if they were to have started out ahead of time and not said, look, this is about getting Hillary elected, if they would have said, look, this is about getting a Democrat elected, and actually walked the walk on that, I think the DNC could have gotten away with a lot of this because it would have been harder for us to prove that they weren't just focusing on Democrats. But based on the fact alone that Debbie Wasserman Schultz was Hillary Clinton's campaign co-chair before she was the DNC chair, it's like the eyebrows have been raised on her since 2011 when she became DNC chair, and she resigned based on the WikiLeaks exposure of her corruption, and then was hired by Hillary Clinton's campaign, and then Donna Brazile was busted. I mean, there are so many just flagrant, obvious consequences of the primary rigging that I can't imagine that a judge as well established as the federal court judge that is reviewing this case, I just can't imagine how they could undo all of those arguments to the point that they could throw out the lawsuit. So we are on bated breath waiting for those transcripts so we can at least look at those now. And then we'll wait, and God knows how long it'll be for the order to be issued, but it shouldn't be too long. And if they allow discovery to begin, then fucking shit's about to hit the fan. And oh my god, if this is litigating going into 2018, that will be like the biggest gift to progressives ever. So everyone lend your support to Jared Beck and Elizabeth Lee Beck. They're married, and they are, I mean, seriously on the front line fighting for democracy. It's so weird. I think about people going to war and fighting for democracy, or, people going to war in the military a lot of times are fighting for oil. There's so many people that are fighting for democracy that are just average people. Not to say that these aren't super brilliant, badass lawyers who are brave and courageous beyond explanation, but they're everyday Americans, and it doesn't take veterans or military service people to fight for democracy. And there are lots of acts that can be in support of democracy, but the power of litigation is real, and it's really outstanding what they're doing, and I highly encourage everyone to support them in all of the work that they do with this lawsuit, regardless of the outcome, and in the future. So check them out. Just more of the good people that have kind of come out of the woodwork to defend democracy as it has been taken away from us by the Democratic Party. So that's I feel like I had to drink it like a shot because I was trying to get back to the talk real quick. Oh, it's 8 o'clock. Holy shit, it's already been an hour. Goddamn. I think I might be encroaching on someone else's time. Okay, so my teeth aren't purple yet, so I can drink 6 ounces without purple teeth. A couple real quick things. I'm going to look on my Facebook to see if I get yelled at. I don't know if anything's on Real Progressives at 9, but I'm going to try and click real quick and see if anyone's kicking me off. So Bernie introduced a federal $15 minimum wage bill, or that's in the works, so check that out. Federal $15 minimum wage is in action, so check that out. We need to support that. Newspapers that have been exposed for supporting the Syrian war: New York Times, USA Today, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal. Oh, go figure, those 4, of course. Those are the newspapers that are most heavy-handedly supporting the Syrian regime change war, so we need to be busting our chops on those journalists, calling them out. New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, and USA Today, so watch for those. Jeff Weaver, sad story I didn't get to, but Jeff Weaver, who was really heavily involved in the Bernie Sanders campaign and was really hard-hitting on many interviews last year, turns out total snake, tried to sold out the Bernie delegates at the convention. Shattered is revealing more about this. So I didn't have a chance to talk about Jeff Weaver today, but Twitter search him and follow the commentary on him, because basically it's another like pure like massive backstabber, and I'm really disappointed in Jeff Weaver. I thought that he was a real fighter for us, and it turns out he was an opportunist. And it's like just the worst when someone like says, "Oh no, I get it. I know how important it is to have someone fighting for the people right now." Like, that bravery is one thing, to say all that and then find out that you're actually bullshitting us and you're gonna sell it out at the first possible opportunity. I mean, I don't pay those people any mind, but they deserve opposition and shame. So look into Jeff Weaver and what he's been up to. Net neutrality, also something we have to watch. Trump is basically, they're trying to let ISPs start charging us for all the different types of content that we're accessing on the internet. So we're about to have to make some fucking noise for net neutrality, and do some research on that, follow that. I wish I had more than an hour. God damn. I didn't realize how fast that went. And then, you know, the mainstream media is talking about North Korea a lot. Obviously, there's a shit ton of saber rattling going on. I wish I had more time to talk about it, but I don't. But Lindsey Graham gave a talk, or was commenting on something, and he's completely unhinged. It's crazy to think about how much Lindsey Graham is like. I read somewhere that he may or may not be getting blackmailed by the CIA, which wouldn't surprise me, but whether or not that's true, who knows? Oh, the CIA would never do that. He would never blackmail John McCain or Lindsey Graham, try and get them to talk up war as much as possible and threaten them if they don't. It would never happen. Lindsey Graham said some crazy ass shit. He's a psychopath and he wants war, and we need more Tulsi Gabbards in the world. So, check out the warmongers who are trying to rattle the sabers in North Korea. He was basically saying, yeah, a Korean war would be really bad for Korea and really bad for Japan and really bad for China, but it wouldn't be bad for us at all. It'd be totally fine. So, you know, we'd just make a lot of money off of it. So it's not a big deal. So don't worry about it. It was like the sickest shit I've ever seen. Like, and people think I'm very dramatic, and I'm probably very dramatic, but I try to like not be necessarily. But that was one of the like most piece of shit things that I've ever heard. He's like, look, a nuclear war on the Korean Peninsula would be terrible for all those Asian countries over there, but we'd be fine. So it's fucked up. And I'm swearing, and I don't think Facebook cares that I swear. They probably actually care more about my criticisms for the deep state than they do for my potty mouth. So anyway, I am going to wrap it up with that. I can't believe that was already 1 hour, and I have drank 3, 6, 7.5 ounces of red wine, of Boom Boom Barack Obama shit, unconstitutionally like a motherfucker. I drank 7 ounces, and my smile has not been turned purple. So next week I'm going to have to drink faster, and it's good to have goals in life, and that's going to be mine, is to drink faster next week. So anyway, check out Mike Sionato's interview with Jared Beck last night. Watch for the transfers to the DNC lawsuit. This has been Trending Topics. My name is Zach Haller. I write more than I feel people even want to read at this point, but I am. So check my shit out elsewhere, and I will be back here on Thursday night. And I hope, did this bother you? Is this crooked? Oh, I should have done that. Anyway, give me feedback, because I want you guys to be enjoying this, and I appreciate everything you have to say. So thanks for everybody's participation. Good to be here with you all. I'll be here next Thursday, and I will catch you on Twitter. Okay, so have some drinks. Cheers. Have a good weekend, everybody. See you later.